Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build this M4A3E8, which doesn't really roll off the tongue quite as well as Sherman Easy 8 does, so let's call it that. This is, as you might have guessed, the Tamiya 1/48th scale plastic kit. There's nothing on the back of the box, no surprises there. These kits don't usually have anything on the back of the box, and that's okay. The front looks very nice, very Sherman-y. Inside the box, under all the sprues, we find the weights. These are 4 simple metal rods. Most of the Tamiya 48th scale kits include weights, and sometimes they are like this. Sometimes they're plates, and sometimes the lower hull is a die-cast piece. I would say you never know which one you'll get, but that's untrue. The box will tell us if it's a die-cast hull. The kit, obviously, also includes some sprues. They're very nicely moulded in a sort of olive drab browny colour, so even if you don't paint it, it'll still be something vaguely in the colour a Sherman might appear in. Clearly, painting it would be better though. I'm getting off topic already, aren't I?
Yes, Herbert, you are.
It's probably not going to surprise anybody when I say these sprues are really nice and neatly moulded. If nothing else, Tamiya have consistently high quality.
You always say that, Herbert.
I know, but it's always true, isn't it? Of course, even on the highest quality kits, mould lines still exist, and they need to be removed. Fortunately, with this kit, that won't take a lot of work at all. I would say the detail is rather good. It's not super detailed, and it'll never please the rivet counters. Either way, the kit's detail is quite good, and Tamiya are pretty consistent with this as well. The tracks are link and length, which I think is pretty much the same across all of the Tamiya kits in this scale, at least those that have tracks. Some people are just not into link and length tracks, and that's okay, but these are quite good, and include keying to make them very easy to install. I would take these over the dreaded rubber band tracks any day. We also get this little sprue, which I'm pretty sure is included with every US tank. It's mostly tools and a machine gun, so stuff that would be common across those tanks. The decal sheet here is just stars, 2 of which have been blacked out. I'm kind of surprised that there aren't at least some tank numbers that you would see on the side of the hull, but this might be historically accurate, I wouldn't know. Tamiya decals are quite decent, so I'm confident these will work as intended. This string for the towing cable is also included. You get far more than you actually need, but that's not a bad thing, and somebody might find a use for it. I would prefer a plastic cable part to this, but we'll see about that later. And here, the most exciting part of the kit, the polycaps. 4 of them in fact. Heck yeah. This background information sheet comes in the box, and I didn't read it, but I'm sure it contains a bunch of information about the Sherman Easy 8. On the other side, there's a couple of basic painting and marking guides. One is for the 5th Armoured Division in Germany, April 1945, and the other is for the 4th Armoured Division in Bastogne, January 1945. And of course, we have instructions. Very good for when we need to be instructed. Please insert the standard Herbert Erpaderp complaining about fold-out instruction sheets here. These are consistent with what Tamiya normally do, so I can't complain too much. The important thing is that the instructions are clear and easy to understand and follow, which is certainly the case here. The part where I glue the bits of plastic together will be after this, because the first thing to do is glue the metal weights into place. This is about as easy as it looks, and I'm sure you will agree, it looks quite easy. I'm using super glue, of course, because plastic cement just doesn't care for metal and refuses to bond it. As you can see, my superglue is old and getting all goopy and gross, but it's good enough for this purpose. Of course, if you don't want to add the weights, you don't have to. That's the nice thing about this kind of weight versus the die-cast hull. You get the choice to omit them. Now, we can glue the bits of plastic together, with plastic cement. Praise the glue god. First comes this. You could either call this a wall or support part, because it'll support the sides of the lower hull, which go on now. There's keying here where the bogies mount, and where the support meets the walls, and that makes it very easy to get this all together and lined up nice and neat, though of course you will need to use a bit of pressure. Once both sides are on, I add the transmission casing to the front of the hull. This pretty much just slips right into place. Across the top of that goes this row of bolts. Pay attention to the instructions to determine which way this should go up. There's a couple of mounting holes on the underside of this part for some little brackety things, so why not install some little brackety things? I'm sure these have a more sensible name like Barry or something, but brackety things works as well. I follow this by attaching the lower rear plate, and it pretty much just drops right into place. Simple enough. Next, I install these idler wheel mounts, I guess you might call them. These needed a little bit of nudging and fiddling, but they go on easily enough. And then, right next to those, in the little circular mounts, I put the exhaust pipes. These aren't too difficult to put into place, though do make sure you've got the correct part on either side. Rear brackety things come next, and these are just as simple to install as the ones on the front of the hull. You could also, at this point, install the towing hitch mount. However, I had a carpet monster attack, so no mounting bracket. Fear not though, I did find it later. The rear venti thing that vents at the rear is comprised of two parts, and they can be glued together like so. And why not install that now? It goes here between these two bits that extend out from the rear of the hull. Apply a little pressure from the sides and it should stay there. Obviously glue should be included or it's just going to fall out. Now seemed like as good a time as any to assemble the drive sprockets. If you've built one of these Tamiya tanks before, you should be familiar with this. You simply slide the polycap into the hole in the centre, then you stick the other half of the sprocket on. The keying will ensure the teeth all line up nice and neatly with each other, and that will make track installation so much easier. I follow that by installing some return rollers. These do return rollery things. There are two different kinds of return rollers here. These smaller ones go on the three slightly shorter mounting nubs, and these bigger ones are made up of two parts. The inner parts are different to each other. The one with the nub on top should be toward the rear. The outer portions of these are identical. The nub on top of the rear return roller there will function as keying for the tracks later on. Now it's time to install the mounting for the towing hitch, which has been recovered from the jaws of that awful carpet monster. The part is rather simple to install, and I guess if I did actually lose it, it wouldn't be too hard to fabricate a new one with some strip styrene or something. Why not follow this with the towing hitch? This is pretty easy to attach, and I think I've even got it the right way up. Let's get back to the wheels. These are the idler wheels, and they're made up of two parts which go together nice and easily. No sense waiting around, may as well glue them onto their mounts at the rear of the hull, like so. They look really good. Now it's time for bogies. I start by gluing the spring parts on, and there's one of these for either side of the bogie frame, I guess you'd call it. These parts are identical, but they should be facing the opposite direction to each other on either side. The keying will help with this. Then, this little doodad goes here toward the bottom. There's only one of these on each bogie. Eventually, we end up with 6 bogies.
Where are the wheels, Herbert?
That's a really good question. They're here. Obviously we need to glue them to the bogies, and it's not especially hard. At all. It's pretty easy to make sure the wheels are on nice and straight, and apply pressure at the same time. You just press them together and they should straighten up. After a short while, all 6 bogies are done, and they look quite nice if you ask me. I do like the HVSS bogies. I think they look interesting. Attaching these to the hull is the logical next step. The mounts for these are keyed, making it rather easy to get them into place nice and neat. Tracks come next, and as you can see, the first part to install is the long upper run. This part has 2 holes in the top for the keying on the return roller. There are 2 holes because the part is identical. This allows the same part to be used on either side of the tank. You shouldn't be able to see much of the unused hole when it's all together, but if you really wanted, you could fill it in. Once that's in place, I add the individual links around the drive sprocket. This is where having that polycap in the center of the drive sprocket, which is not glued into place, is helpful. It allows you to rotate the sprocket so the teeth line up with the tracks properly. Following the instructions, I put the rest of the tracks on, and really it's pretty simple to do. There's not a lot of different parts, so there's not too much to cause confusion. You might have to do a little bit of kajiggering to get all of the tracks to sit properly. I did on the left side, because the final space for the last single link was a little bit tight. I fixed that by nudging the tracks a bit to create a tiny bit of slack near the rear road wheel. I wouldn't consider that a major problem, and it's probably one caused by me. In the end, we've got some good-looking tracks. Excellent. Now seems like a good time to assemble the upper hull. If we don't, we won't have one, and then what will the turret sit on? The hull is a bit unusual for these Tamiya kits, in that it's not a tub, so we have to glue the sides into place. The instructions say to put these parts on in a particular order, which is left hull side, then the center support part, and that, you might guess, is followed by the hull right side, and you would be correct in that guess. The hull rear is the final piece of the puzzle.
It's not a very tricky puzzle.
No, it's not. When I've let that bond for a bit, I apply these mudguard parts, I guess you might call them. I had to apply some pressure here for gap minimization purposes, but it's nothing too difficult. Next, the engine deck, and this part more or less just drops right into place. Obviously you do want this to be around the right way and not upside down, but it's pretty easy to manage. You might see those big holes along the sides of the hull. Those are mounting holes for the spare track links, which I'm going to add now. These are quite easy to place, and according to the instructions, I've even positioned them the correct way up. There doesn't seem to be a lot of spare track links installed on this tank, but maybe they just don't need it. It looks good anyway. At the front, I install the travel lock for the main gun. This one is around the right way. Good job, Herbert. I put the hull machine gun in next because why not? And this simply slots into its mount like so. It's probably not a bad idea to make sure it's the right way up. Then I put this, is it a siren or a horn? Whatever it is, it's kind of fiddly because of its small size, but I did eventually get it into place, facing what seems to be the right way. There are more fiddly bits of detail to add, but it's probably a good idea to add them after I've connected the upper and lower hull parts, which is what I do next. This is easy. Simply apply glue to the parts that will be in contact with each other, and press them together. I also press forward a bit to try and eliminate that gap at the front of the hull, and it mostly seems to have worked. Now that's together, let's continue adding details, like these headlamps. They're not the most fiddly headlamps I've installed. In fact, you can see that I easily got them into place with my fat fingers. I follow this with some lift rings. I assume they're for lifting anyway. These are easy to place, thanks to the guide holes on either side of the hull. Then, to guard the lights from being brushed by brush, I add these brush guards. I felt like I might break them when I was cleaning the sprue remnants from them, because they're kind of thin. But I didn't break them, and they went into place easily enough. Sherman crews like to pick things, so we add this pick head. There's probably a handle for it around here somewhere. Across the rear of the engine deck here, I add this hammer. Hammer time is unscheduled, so you never know when it's going to happen, so this is useful to carry around. Then, just forward of that, I put this large wrench, I think it is. I did break this when cleaning it up, which is kind of annoying, but I fixed it by gluing both halves of the broken part on. Once it's been painted, you'd probably never know. Another part I broke is this brush guard for the siren or horn or whatever this thing is. This was easy enough to glue back together, and it goes into place just like I didn't break it. Again, once it's painted, you would probably never know. And now for, quite possibly, the most fiddly part of not only this kit, but any Tamiya kit I've built so far. These little brackety doodads that go along the side of the hull. Of course, I've got no idea what you might call them, but they do have some very tiny guide knobs, which do actually help quite a bit. In fairness, it wasn't that fiddly with the help of tweezers, and the result is pretty good, so I think it's worth it. I'm kind of surprised there were no carpet monster strikes while I was doing this. Happy, but surprised. Next I glue these little rod things onto the bottom of the rear shelf part, which is simple enough. I then mount the shelf to the hull rear. This is kind of a mistake. You might have seen there are some mounts underneath where the shelf goes, and those are for the crank starting rod, or what I think is a crank starting rod. I didn't realise until it was a bit late. Fortunately for me, it's kind of hard to see what is or isn't under there, and if anybody asks, it was no good punk kids that came and stole the crank. At any rate, the shelf goes on nice and easy, and then we can add the support brackets to the sides. These are a little fiddly, but the tweezers helped quite a bit, and the parts, if you put them on the right way around, are shaped such that they should sit at the correct angle without too much kajiggering. Tail lights come next. These are some tiny little bits, so be careful not to lose them. And then, some more lift ring things. These have little raised bits they should sit on, just make sure that you are using the correct parts. I clipped one of the rings for the turret off and was confused when it didn't fit. It only took me a little while to figure it out. It's a good idea to protect the rear light thingies from brush attacks, so I add brush guards here too. They pretty much just drop right into place. Why not finish adding the tools? This shovel will be quite the thing for whichever crewman likes to dig the most. They'll probably end up fighting over it. And then, a bar. Not the kind you drink at though. This is the kind that you would use for jimmying and prying. Another smaller rod-like part goes in place above that. Is this the handle for the pick? I'm not sure. Maybe. The final tool is this axe. It goes into place just above the pick head and looks quite axe, if you axe me. And now that the hull is pretty much completed, it's turret time. And that means it's time for more polycaps. They go onto these little pole things here, and they're very polycappy. Onto those I put these things, which will eventually attach to the inside of the gun mantlet. Unless you're gluing them into place for some reason, don't worry about how they're positioned for now. We can change it later thanks to the polycaps. I glue the hatch into this opening for the turret's left side, and this is clearly so that the crew can reach out and give the enemy the finger.
You've used that joke before, Herbert.
Yeah, well, it's important to recycle. The instructions give an order in which to glue the turret parts on, the first being the rear wall, then the right side wall part, which does fit pretty well, though you might need to do some nudging and pressure applying to minimize gaps. The next wall part comes next. Very descriptive, Herbert. This really shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, were you not going to add the other side? Like before, nudging and pressure were needed, and to be sure things are lined up nicely, you can also test fit with the roof part. The roof part is what I added next, and I did test fit before this, and yet again, pressure was needed here, though there is still a bit of a gap. I'm not sure if it's meant to be there or not, and I'm sure it wouldn't be too hard to make it go away if you felt the need to. There's a little ring thing that goes on the sides of the turret into these little mounting holes, which is pretty simple. And there's one of these for either side of the turret. And then I add this little antenna, I think it is. This has a little sort of round protrusion, and it seems like that's meant to be there, and the instructions want that to be facing outward. Whatever this thing is, it's made up of two parts, which are fairly easy to put together, though it did need a fair bit of pressure to minimize gaps. I put that aside and install this thing, which I think is a vision device for the gunner or something. Then this lift ring for the forward part of the turret. There's only one mounting hole for it, and it does seem like it should go around one way. The commander's hatch could be modelled open if you're into that sort of thing, and the kit does include a commander figure, which obviously I've not used. There's also a little platform for the commander that you would glue inside of the turret, but because I'm not using the figure, I'm not going to use the platform either. As you can probably tell, the hatch is really easy to get into place. This doodad that we glued together a few moments ago can be installed here. It should go around this way with the hanging bit toward the inside of the turret. On the turret rear goes this rounded doodad.
Such technical terms, Herbert.
I know, right? There's some pretty obvious keying for this part, which obviously makes it nice and easy to place. Onto that, this arm mount thing can go. This is also easy to place, whatever it is. Maybe it's another mount for a machine gun or something. Speaking of gun, I glue the separate half of the muzzle brake onto the end of the main gun. It does fit quite well, though it's not perfect, and a little bit of work may need to be done on this. For me, it's fine for now. I glue it into the gun mantlet like so, and there's keying to ensure that this goes on the correct way, so we don't have to worry about getting the muzzle brake all wibbly wobbly. To attach the gun assembly to the turret front, we make sure these little cap things on the polycaps have the rectangular shaped bit facing forward. This should key into the back of the mantlet. The gun should, under normal circumstances, be movable after this, though I have added enough glue that it probably won't move again, which is how I like it. You do yours how you like it. There's a machine gun, which I would consider to be an optional part, though as I suspect you can tell, I've chosen to use it. You glue the ammo box onto the side, which unfortunately has a hollow bottom. If that's an issue for you, it shouldn't be too hard to fill in with putty. Then, the gun mounting pole goes into place here next to the commander's hatch, and surprise surprise, the machine gun mounts on top of the pole. This is pretty simple to do, you might just have to nudge it a bit so that it sits good and straight. And here is where we use that string. After cutting a piece to the appropriate length, 120mm, I add superglue, and mine is still goopy, so it's not really the best to use for this, but it works. I press the end of the string into the plastic end pieces and hope that it stays there. The string is just a little bit too thick for this, so when the glue is dried, I carefully cut it down a little bit to try and make it less obvious. Also, I did a pretty bad job of filming this, but you get the idea. To attach the towing cable to the model, I make sure I've got the correct end, both ends are different, and then you just glue it into place like so. This part is pretty easy, and this kind of string-based towing cable isn't really bad, but it would be better if the string was the right size. I could jigger the string to go into place around the turret ring and hatches and such, and then added a tiny bit of plastic cement there. This won't hold it if you're even slightly rough with it, but it does work to keep it in place for now. You can probably see why I said I would prefer this to be a plastic part, it just would have been a lot simpler. Anyway, once it's on, it does look pretty good. With the locking tab mechanism, we can now easily attach the turret. Now that that's done, the Tamiya 48th scale Sherman Easy 8 is now completed, and I think it's a pretty cool little model. Well, it's not that little, but it is pretty cool. I feel like it's been quite a while since I've built a Sherman, and this kit was perfect for that kind of itch. Unless you want a different variation of the Sherman, I guess. It's not at all surprising that a Tamiya kit is good, but it is still nice to say. As I mentioned earlier, the detail isn't extreme, but it's pretty good. I would say it's more than good enough to suit the needs of most modelers. And for that detail, the assembly isn't too difficult or time-consuming. Some things like the little brackety things along the sides did make this build take a little bit longer than the average Tamiya tank in this scale takes, but I think that was worth it, and it still wasn't a very long build. It was, however, a very fun build, even though I almost lost a part to the carpet monster, which is always annoying. I gotta say, it's pretty satisfying to find parts that you thought you'd lost on the floor. It feels like a little victory, and I guess it is. It's about time the carpet monster took a loss. Anyway, I'm pretty satisfied with how this kit has turned out, but I think it might look a little bit better with some extra stowage added. Stuff like fuel cans in the rear shelf and some rolls or something. I think I might do that before I paint this. I mean, I wasn't planning on painting it anytime soon, so there's plenty of time to find some suitable stowage and stick it on. I don't really have a lot to say about this that you can't see with your own eyes, so maybe I'll just stop waffling. If you've got any questions or comments, I think you can figure out where they should go. It's the comment section below. If you want to watch me build kits like this one live on stream, head on over to my Twitch channel, which is where I happen to stream. The link is in the description below. If you haven't already done so, why not subscribe here on YouTube? It's free. Or if you have the means and you want to help a Herbert Erpaderp do Herbert Erpaderp things and see my videos a bit early, consider becoming a patron. You can find links to Patreon and all of my other things like social media in the description below. As always, I shall return soon, so until then, be excellent to each other, have an amazing day, and thanks for watching. Farewell.